A lot of what I'm going to talk about this morning really started with a conversation with Dave Wharton a few years ago. But the basic idea behind my remarks is that character is destiny. Character is destiny. And I'll just tell a quick story, and maybe you alluded to it, but in 2013, I had a call. I was in the headmaster's office at the community school, had a call from Dave Wharton. And Dave said, I've just watched an absolutely powerful TED Talk by a person named Angela Duckworth, who's a professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. And she talked about grit, perseverance, resilience, and fundamentally about character. And Dave and I have been in a conversation really all those years. And what we've agreed along the way is that we really must educate our children, teach our students for character, and we need to select for character when we're hiring people to our organization. Now, of course, we remember our own youth and the churches, our families, schools, colleges, which talked about character. You look at the mission statements of the colleges that we all attended. And of course, we remember the fundamental character topics that came up in the way we were raised in our families. We're very fortunate people from that point of view. But really, what is character? What are we talking about when we talk about character? And we've alluded to perseverance and resilience and grit. But there are really four categories of character that have emerged in the work addressed to character since the Duckworth TED Talk. There's moral ethical character, which is honesty, caring, ethical conduct, gratitude. Performance character, which is a lot of what Duckworth talks about: perseverance, resilience, grit, a work ethic. Intellectual character, respect for facts, the truth, and good science. And of course, this is a contemporary issue, as we all know. And civic character, which is giving back, participating in our communities, and being generous to others less fortunate than us. And then there's what I call leadership character, which is some combination of the first four categories and the things you all know about what good leadership takes. It's thinking over the long term, thinking to the future, transparency, having the guts to make tough decisions, and having a very clear goal orientation. So there is leadership character, and I know that's a fundamental topic of what Tugboat has been addressing over these many years. But why talk about character here and now and talk about it today? This is not the time and place to talk about politics, but to be honest about it, we live in a fractured world. The political divisions are so stark, they're scary. We've emerged from a COVID world and living through Zoom, not connected to other human beings directly. There's a clear gap between the haves and have-nots in this country. And then, of course, there's the rootlessness of social media and how that really predominates in our society. And then there's a mental health epidemic to a great degree across the country, and an absence of good character in many places in our country. Another reason to talk about character is, and I would assert that we probably share this as a goal, to foster happy, healthy, successful children, successful in their own terms, with a core foundation of good character. And then lastly, if I could say this, we need leaders of character in our own homes and in our own companies. This is a fundamental issue that touches us all. Dave, you alluded to this earlier, but let's be candid about the realities of being a leadership. Nobody promised us a rose garden, and we put many hours into our leadership role. We bring it home. I've brought it home, and we're in a state of constant vigilance. Perhaps not in the new healthy way to think about companies, but there's a parallel inner life that leaders have, and that's part of the complexity. And then, of course, part of the equation are our spouses and our partners. And I've found that in my leadership roles, when I come home and I say, I can't believe what somebody just said to me today, they take it personally. The enemies list that my spouse has built up over the years is unbelievable. And of course I say, this is not personal. This is really about business and running an organization. But at a certain level, it is personal. And our own spouses internalize some of that stress that we frequently bring home. But they want to do well. They want to be our partners. Then, of course, we have the children that are a part of this equation. And we're in the land of Hemingway here. And Hemingway said, a good novelist has a built-in shock-proof crap detector. That's our children. They were genetically born with a crap detector. So when we come home and we're going through the motions, they detect that instantly. So this is a complex equation of being a leader and having a family and raising children. And parenting is not an easy thing. And poor Linus speaks to this. Dear son, I hope you enjoy and also appreciate the lunch I made for you today. Did you have a nice morning? Did you volunteer in class as I suggested? Teachers are always impressed by students who volunteer. It is a sure way to get better grades. Remember, better grades now will mean a better college later on. Did you eat your carrots? Proper nutrition is essential to good study. Are you sitting in the sun? And then finally, Charlie Brown comes over and says, "Hey, Linus, what are you having for lunch?" Carrots, peanut butter, and guilt. And Linus's parents were doing all the right things. But I can tell you there's a growing body of research that's come to this fundamental conclusion that character attributes, the things we're talking about today, are a more powerful predictor of success long-term in school, work, and life. More predictive than the old traditional measures of what were your grades, what was your GPA, and tell me about your SAT score. This is a fundamentally important finding. If we took this to heart, our world would change in many fundamental ways. But what does science tell us about character development? I'm going to touch upon 5 fundamental principles of fostering and nurturing character. The first is to develop what one would call a growth mindset. Secondly, providing challenges and experiences that are just hard enough. Being demanding and supportive. Preach what we practice. Of course, we want to practice what we preach, but talk about character and then pay attention to daily habits. And we know our daily habits can be both positive, they can be virtues, and they can be vices. So let me touch on each of these 5 principles briefly. First, the power of a growth mindset. The opposite of a growth mindset is a fixed mindset, and this can be highly debilitating to any of us, but certainly to our children. That's where a teacher may or a parent may label a child is not smart or slow or not a good athlete. And this labeling that happens so frequently in society and frequently behind the 4 doors of a family can have a very long-term negative impact on a young person. It's essentially a self-fulfilling prophecy. When I come to believe I'm a C student, I kind of live with that, and that goes with me for a lifetime. Then, of course, there's the dynamic where our young people, where our children are thinking that your love, Dad, is conditional on the things I do well. Do I get good grades? Do I go to a good college? That, as you know, is highly debilitating and something that we always have to be sensitive to as parents. But the fact is that our brains are plastic throughout our lives. Neuroscience has shown this for a long period of time. We're learning beings, and challenges are really opportunities. And it's that attitude, that mindset, that if we can set that in place with our young people is really very, very powerful. Let me give you one example of the labeling that probably all of us in this room have experienced. Can I ask you, can you remember your SAT score? I bet a lot of you can. That 602 in verbal. We carry with us our GPA, our SAT score, and that's a kind of labeling or fixed mindset that is candidly unhealthy. And I live in a part of the world where whether or not you go to a so-called selective college is a big deal. It's a badge. It's the kind of things that get talked about at cocktail parties. And it's called family branding. And We know a professor at Stanford University has coined that phrase, family branding, and that can be very debilitating. It's the bragging rights about where our kid goes to school. And we live in a society where there are winners and losers, and that's not a great way to think about the world. Well, there's an incentive, frankly, to fix the game, and many of us are in a position to be able to get our kids to a wonderful school, get tutoring, get SAT prep, and that's part of getting to those numbers that mean so much in our society. And frankly, there's a temptation to cheat. You've all heard about the varsity blues scandal. Isn't that nauseating? But this is all part of the psychology, the fever around SAT scores and going to a selective college and the bragging rights that comes with that. Well, I can tell you, we are in a state of an existence now of almost total disruption of the college admissions process. There are over 1,500 four-year colleges that are test optional. What that means is that you can apply to Harvard or Carnegie Mellon or Stanford without submitting a standardized test score. That is a revolutionary occurrence that has happened over the last year and a half. And in fact, 60% of the young people that have applied to the selective colleges in this country did not submit a test score. What this does, from my point of view, is open up the world to look at other qualities other than those scores, a GPA score and SAT score. It's what we call a holistic review. In your case, you have a candidate in your company, but in this case, also a candidate for college. And there's a large number of colleges now are explicitly looking for students of character. And that's frankly the work that I'm doing with a number of colleges, 100 colleges or so around the country, including the most selective colleges in the country. And this warmed my heart. The Dean of Admission at the University of Chicago, one of the most selective colleges in the country, they were one of the first schools to go so-called test optional. We were sending a message to students that one test basically identifies you, despite the fact that we would say testing is only one piece of the application. That was the machinery operating in higher education. Provide the right kind of challenge. These are students at community school running the rapids on the Salmon River. And there's a trained supervisor is a part of this exercise and running the Salmon River. And it was a great experience, a great learning experience for these young people. So providing just hard enough challenges, which is really requiring hard work that has a doable result. Not that you necessarily succeed. And so part of the discussion is Ryan, who works with Dave, Ryan and I were talking last night, about we both have played competitive tennis all our lives, and we've done the right things, and eventually you lose. And so how do we think about losing, or how do we think about failure? I'd like the word failure to not be in our vocabulary. Part of it is being philosophical about those goals that we strived for, did all the right things, and it didn't quite happen the way we wanted it to. But with hard enough challenges, we earn our own self-confidence. We have a history of success over a period of time. We're philosophical about failures, and we have resilience, perseverance, and good old-fashioned grit. And that's the lifelong foundation of a good life. So a young person wants to say, yes, I can. I'm fearless, but I'm smart about it. Then, of course, having demanding and supportive parents and mentors. And Duckworth did a study in which he asked college students, who were your most influential mentors? And the answer was almost universal. They are demanding and they're supportive. And one of the students, and she asked the students to write a letter to that mentor. And one of the students wrote, I thank my volleyball coach from high school. He not only was encouraging, but he was demanding of me. He believed me in so much that he would not stop pushing me to become better. I called him to read my letter, and by the end we were both crying. We were both sobbing. And then Duckworth herself wrote one of her mentors, and this is a MacArthur Genius Award and best-selling author, and she wrote one of her mentors, of all the blessings in life we have to be thankful for, it's hard to beat the good fortune of having a demanding and supportive person who cares about me. And she wrote that letter. And this is the cluster of the research in this quadrant between supportive and demanding that students have reported. These are the most influential people in my life. And to preach what we practice, and vice versa. And to put character into the discussions, into the vocabulary that we have day by day. Parents with students, coaches with athletes, teachers with students, supervisors with staff, and to show and to demonstrate that we do everything we can to keep the faith with our core beliefs. And in my lifetime, and perhaps in yours, there have been some conversations, not really conversations, but things that valued adults have said to me along the way, and I've carried them with me all my life. And there was a teacher in 4th grade that said, "You misbehaved, you said the wrong things to a girl in our class, a young woman in our class. Carol was hurt, and I want you to know that." I've never forgotten that incident going back to 4th grade. I was a Army ROTC summer camp. I didn't listen to some instructions. I wandered in on a Thursday night to ask about taking a leave. The next day, in front of 200 fellow cadets, the head of the camp, the commander, yelled at me and got into it with me in front of 200 people. I never forgot the principle, you better listen. And then at one point along the way, I was dean of students at a college that had made a commitment to bring African American students and Hispanic students to campus. And I had a stomach ache for 2 years. There was so much tension and violence and fights and one thing or another. But I was pulled aside that first fall with that new job by the vice president of the college. And he said, "You know, we have racist behavior going on in our campus, and this can't continue. And I'm relying on your leadership to have an impact." So leadership obviously is not going through the motions, it's taking on a deep commitment. And then finally, and we all know this, it's nurturing the right habits. And the great psychologist William James, a name you probably know, wrote, "Our virtues are habits as much as vices. All our life, so far as it has a definite form, is but a mass of habits, practical, emotional, and intellectual, systematically organized for our weal or woe, and bearing us irresistibly towards our destiny." But what the hell do I know? I've got 2 boys now in the 40 and 42, but they were once teenagers, and I violated most of the things on this list. I nagged, I wasn't patient, I didn't really bring a sense of humor, and in a sense, I wasn't wise enough to help them own their behavior and develop a sense of accountability. I suppose over time, that became embedded. But I didn't talk about, we're a family of 4, we're in this together, we need each other, and we all have to be a part of this. It's kind of easy to punt, isn't it? This is hard work. And many families, the kids are off doing their own thing, they're sent away to school, that sort of thing. But this is so fundamental, embedding in our young people the right way to do things. But why is all this important? Well, frankly, character strength, the research is very strong, is very connected to mental health. There's a mental health crisis in college campuses, for example. The counseling centers are absolutely overwhelmed. Character strengths are a piece of avoiding some of the mental issues that so many of our young people have. And then, of course, character strengths, as I said before, are connected to fostering happy, healthy, successful people, young people. And to be honest about it, our children, our employees, our students are our greatest legacy. In a core way, that's why we're put on the earth. And I believe we have the obligation and the opportunity to make a difference in the world. And Robert Coles wrote this in a book called Lives of Moral Leadership. We need heroes, people who can inspire us, help shape us morally, spur us to a purposeful action. From time to time, we're called on to be those heroes. You are, I am, Dave is, leaders for others, either in a small, day-to-day way or on the world's larger stage. At this time in America and the rest of the world, we seem to need moral leadership especially. Would you agree that we're in a time in history where that call to action is so fundamental. He wrote this 21 years ago. So to return to where I started, what is so fundamental to understand is that character is destiny. Character is destiny. And to a great extent, as leaders and as parents, we're on the face of the earth to foster that among our children. So thank you very much.